last verified data packet we have from Colonel Percy Harrison Fawcett is a letter written in cramped, precise pencil script. It is dated May 29th, 1925. The location is designated as Dead Horse Camp. It is not a digital glitch or a corrupted audio file, but in the analog history of exploration, it functions exactly the same way. It is the moment the signal flatlines. To understand the sheer magnitude of the silence that followed, we must first look at the noise that preceded it. This was not a clandestine operation. This was the 1920s equivalent of a moon launch. The North American Newspaper Alliance had purchased the exclusive rights to the Colonel's dispatches. From London to New York, the public was fed a steady stream of updates. Fawcett was a celebrity, a man synonymous with the blank spaces on the map, a figure who had already survived the worst the Amazon could throw at a human body. He was 60 years old, lean, indestructible, and obsessed. He was heading into the Mato Grosso region of Brazil, an area the size of France that, in 1925, remained one of the few truly opaque spots on the globe. He was looking for a civilization he called Z. Note that he did not call it El Dorado or the City of Gold. He called it Z, a mathematical variable, a placeholder for a certainty he could not yet prove. The expedition consisted of 3 men: Colonel Fawcett, his eldest son Jack, who was 22, and Jack's best friend, Raleigh Reimel. They were accompanied by 2 Brazilian laborers, but only as far as the edge of the known world. The incident, if we can call a disappearance that spans a century an incident, began in the port city of Cuyaba. The noise here was deafening. The heat was a physical weight. We have records of their supplies, a detailed inventory that reads like an autopsy of the expedition before it even died. They packed canned food, powdered milk, guns, ammunition, and surveying instruments, a theodolite, a sextant, a chronometer. These were the tools of a man who intended to map the unknown with military precision. They moved north. The dispatches were sent back by runners, native messengers who ferried the letters down the river systems to the telegraph stations. The world watched the progress. The signal was strong. April 20th, the team leaves Cuyaba. April 23rd, the heat becomes oppressive. May 15th, they reach the Bacquerie Post, the last outpost of what was loosely considered civilization. Here, the static begins to creep in. The terrain changes. The Mato Grosso is not a lush, welcoming paradise. It is a dry forest, a cerrado, a landscape of stunted, twisted trees and termite mounds that rise like grave markers. The insects are not merely pests, they are a torture method. PM flies that leave blood blisters, ticks that burrow into the skin. Raleigh Reimel The third man began to fail here. One foot was swollen, infected by tick bites. He was limping. The data points we have suggest he should have turned back. Logic dictated he return to Kayaba, but the narrative gravity of the expedition was pulling them inward. Fawcett noted Raleigh's condition with a clinical detachment. There was no talk of aborting the mission. On May 29th, they arrived at a location Fawcett had visited years prior. He named it Dead Horse Camp because, on a previous failed attempt, his horse had died there of starvation. It was a place of bad omens, a geographic coordinate defined by failure and death. This is the event horizon. The morning of May 29th was likely humid, the air thick with the smell of rotting vegetation and dry dust. The sun in the Mato Grosso does not rise, it strikes. At this camp, Colonel Fawcett sat down to write his final dispatch. The letter is addressed to his wife, Nina. It is a strange document. It oscillates between logistical report and intimate farewell. He speaks of Jack's health, which is excellent. He speaks of Raleigh's foot, which is worsening. He describes the insects, the heat, the sheer physical grind of the trek. But then the tone shifts. He writes, quote, "You need have no fear of any failure," unquote. It is a statement of absolute confidence delivered from the precipice of oblivion. He hands this letter to the two Brazilian peons. He pays them. He gives them specific instructions to return to civilization. They are the last tether to the outside world. As the peons turn south, heading back toward the Bakuri post, they look back. They see three figures standing at the edge of the camp. The colonel, tall and bearded, his Stetson hat pulled low. Jack, young and muscular. Raleigh, limping, favoring his good leg. Beyond them lies the expanse of the unknown territory, the direction of the Singu River, the direction of sea. The peons walk away. The distance grows. The three figures become silhouettes, then specks, and then they are swallowed by the scrub brush and the heat haze. That is the moment of the glitch. May 29th, 1925. The physical link is severed. However, for the rest of the world, the silence did not hit immediately. This is the nature of the delay in analog communication. The runners took days to reach the telegraph station. The telegraph took time to reach Rio, then London, then New York. The newspapers published the letter from Dead Horse Camp weeks later. The public read the words, "You need have no fear of any failure," and assumed the expedition was progressing. They assumed the silence was part of the plan. Fawcett had warned them. He had stated explicitly that he would be out of contact for a year, perhaps two. He had told the Royal Geographical Society that he did not want rescue parties sent after him, fearing that a large, armed group would provoke the indigenous tribes. He had built a buffer of time around his own disappearance. So the silence stretched. 1925 bled into 1926. The newspapers moved on to other stories. The roaring 20s roared on. But in the Fawcett household, and in the quiet offices of the Royal Geographical Society, the silence began to gain mass. It became heavy. A year passed. No signal. 2 years. The buffer period expired. The high strangeness of this case lies not just in the fact that they vanished, but in how completely the landscape erased them. A modern search and rescue operation relies on pings, on heat signatures, on satellite imagery. In 1925, a search meant walking into the same green hell that swallowed the target, and hoping you didn't disappear too. There were rumors, of course. The data vacuum was filled with noise. Indigenous tribesmen reported seeing white men living in caves. Others reported seeing them clubbed to death near a lagoon. Some said Fawcett had found his city and had simply chosen not to return, reigning as a king in a quartz citadel cut off from the 20th century. But if we strip away the romance and look at the technical reality of the incident, we are left with a disturbing picture. 3 men entered a hostile biome with limited supplies and a degrading medical situation. They sent their support team back. They walked off the edge of the map on a compass bearing that led nowhere known to modern geography. The last verifiable fact is the image of the peons walking away, the sound of their boots on the dry earth, the silence rushing in to fill the space where Fawcett stood. We often imagine disappearances as chaotic events, a crash, a scream, a struggle. But the disappearance of Percy Fawcett was a quiet, deliberate act. It was a door closing softly. The newspapers kept waiting for the next dispatch. The headline writers kept the font set for FAWCETT discovers Z. But the telegraph keys remained still. The wire hummed with nothing but the ambient static of the atmosphere. It is crucial to understand the environment they stepped into. The Mato Grosso in the 1920s was not just a forest. It was a biological fortress. It was inhabited by tribes like the Kalapalo, the Suya, the Zavante peoples who had every reason to be hostile to encroaching white men. It was a labyrinth of waterways that shifted with the rains, of lagoons that looked like solid ground until you stepped on them. And Colonel Fawcett, with his sextant and his chronometer, believed he could navigate this chaos with the logic of a Victorian soldier. He believed the universe followed rules. He believed that if he walked on the correct bearing, the city of Z would reveal itself. He was wrong about the rules. The incident is the transition from history into mythology. As the months turned into years, the certainty of Dead Horse Camp dissolved. The coordinates became fuzzy. The memory of the 3 men began to warp. But But before we descend into the theories, the madness, and the decades of failed rescue missions that would claim over 100 lives, we must hold onto this single crystalline moment. May 29th, 1925. The heat is rising. The insects are swarming. A man hands a letter to a messenger. He turns his back on the safety of the known world. He steps forward, and the feed cuts out. To understand why the disappearance of Percy Fawcett is not simply a tragedy of exploration, but a structural anomaly in the record of the 20th century, we must first strip away the romance of the pith helmet and the machete. We must look at the data. We must look at the man not as an adventurer, but as what he actually was, a technician. Percy Fawcett was not a wandering poet. He was a Royal Geographical Society Founders Medalist. He was a distinguished artillery officer and a boundary surveyor who had spent years defining the borders of Bolivia, Brazil, and Peru. His profession was precision. His primary tool was the theodolite, an instrument designed to impose mathematical order onto the chaos of the wilderness. He lived by coordinates, triangulation, and the rigid logic of cartography. And this is where the signal begins to distort. The primary anomaly in the Fawcett case is not that a man went into the jungle and died. That is a common baseline probability for the Amazon in 1925. The anomaly is that a master surveyor, a man whose entire psychological profile was built on leaving a clear trail, seemingly engineered a navigational paradox that defies resolution. Let us examine the logistics of the final push. The expedition consisted of 3 men: Percy, his son Jack, and Jack's friend Raleigh Rymel. They also had 2 Brazilian laborers, but these men were sent back before the final leg. We are left with a closed system of 3 variables entering a high-entropy environment. The first technical failure is biological. It concerns the physical status of Raleigh Rymel. Based on the final dispatches sent back by Runner on May 29th, 1925, we know the condition of the team. Percy Fawcett notes, with clinical detachment, that Raleigh is suffering from a septic foot. One leg is swollen and inflamed. In the humid, bacterial incubator of the Mato Grosso, this is not a minor injury. It is a systemic failure of the body. Mobility would be agonizing, if not impossible. Yet, in that same final dispatch, Fawcett indicates an intention to accelerate. He projects a travel velocity of 10 to 15 miles per day into unknown territory. This creates a friction in the narrative that cannot be smoothed over. We are asked to believe that a 3-man unit, dragging a casualty who is likely delirious, with fever and unable to bear weight, intends to outpace healthy indigenous trackers in terrain that requires machete work for every meter of progress. The energy calculations do not balance. Either Fawcett was lying to the outside world about their speed to discourage pursuers, or he was lying about Raleigh's condition. Or, most disturbingly, the unit had already decided to subtract the damaged variable. But the letters imply Raleigh is still with them. The timeline of travel versus the biology of sepsis creates a glitch. The expedition moves faster on paper than human physiology allows in reality. Then there is the issue of Dead Horse Camp. This location serves as the last verifiable data point, the final server ping before the network goes dark. Fawcett provided coordinates for this camp. He described it in detail. It was a landmark he had established on a previous expedition, named for an animal that had died there. Decades of search parties have attempted to triangulate this position based on Fawcett's own logs. They have failed. This should be impossible. Fawcett was not an amateur guessing by the sun. He carried a chronometer and a sextant. He could calculate longitude and latitude to within a few hundred yards. When modern surveyors and satellite analysis attempt to reconcile Fawcett's recorded coordinates with the physical geography of the region, the data does not align. The rivers are not where he said they were. The elevation does not match the topographic reality. We are forced to confront two possibilities. One, the Royal Geographical Society's most capable surveyor suddenly lost the ability to read his instruments. Two, the coordinates were encrypted. This suggests that the disappearance was not an accident, but a procedure. Fawcett was known to be paranoid about rival explorers finding his lost city of Z. It is highly probable that the data he sent back in his final letters, the breadcrumbs intended for the public, were intentionally corrupted. He fed false coordinates into the record to mask his true vector. He ghosted the world. The anomaly is that the errors in his log are too consistent to be mistakes. They are obfuscations. Let us move to the acoustic anomaly, the silence of the Kalapalo. The Kalapalo people were the last known group to interact with the expedition. In the oral histories of the region, usually reliable and detailed regarding interactions with Christianos, the account of Fawcett fractures into contradictory noise. There are stories that the Kalapalo killed them because Fawcett stopped offering gifts. There are stories that they pointed him east toward the Green Hill and watched the smoke of his campfires for 5 days until the smoke stopped. But the physical evidence, the hardware, is missing. When an expedition vanishes in the Amazon, the organic matter disappears. The jungle metabolizes flesh, cloth, and paper within weeks, but the inorganic matter remains. Brass belt buckles, the steel of a Winchester rifle, the glass lenses of a theodolite, the platinum casing of a chronometer. in almost every other instance of a disappeared explorer in the 20th century, items resurface. They enter the local economy. A tribe trades a rifle to another tribe. A belt buckle is found worn as an ornament 20 years later. Objects have a half-life. They migrate. In the case of the Fawcett party, the vacuum is absolute. Despite decades of intense searching, rewards offered, and anthropologists living among the tribes, not a single screw, button, or lens verified to belong to the 1925 expedition has ever been recovered from the indigenous circulation. It is as if the expedition did not die, but was erased. The lack of artifacts is a statistical deviation. Even if they were massacred and thrown into a river, items usually wash up or are salvaged. For 3 men fully equipped with the high-value technology of their era to leave 0 physical trace in the local economy is an anomaly that suggests a different kind of ending. It suggests they did not fall into the hands of the people we think they did, or they went to a place where trade does not exist. And then there is the data point that refuses to fit anywhere: the 1932 transmission. 7 years after the silence began, a Swiss trapper named Stefan Ratton emerged from the Mato Grosso with a report that disrupted the accepted narrative of death. Ratton was not a glory seeker. He was a man of the bush, unconcerned with international fame. He reported stumbling upon a camp of indigenous people where he saw an older white man with a long beard, dressed in animal skins. The anomaly here is the specific behavior of the captive. According to Ratton, the white man approached him but did not speak. Instead, he showed Ratton a signet ring. When Ratton spoke to him in English, the man did not respond verbally, but signaled distress with his eyes, all while maintaining a rigid, stoic posture as his captors watched. Ratton later identified the man from photographs as Percy Fawcett. Critics dismiss this as a hallucination or a fabrication, but the details contain a jarring specificity. Ratton described the man's legs. He noted that the man had swollen legs covered in mosquitoes, yet he stood with a military bearing. If this was Fawcett, the anomaly is the survival time. 7 years in a hostile environment, held in a state of semi-captivity, defies the survival curves of the region. But the more profound glitch is the refusal to speak. If it was Fawcett, why not shout? Why not scream his name? Unless the silence was part of the protocol, unless the man Ratton saw was no longer Percy Fawcett, colonel of the Royal Artillery, but something else, a man who had crossed a threshold and knew that a rescue mission would only bring more death. The Ratton glitch forces us to reconsider the timeline. We assume the event ended in 1925. But if Ratton is correct, the The event was a long-duration signal that persisted into the 1930s, unread and unacknowledged. We must also consider the signet ring anomaly. In 1979, a ring appeared. It was Fawcett's signet ring, but it was not found in the jungle. It was found in a pawn shop in Lima, Peru. This object breaks the continuity of the narrative completely. How does a ring belonging to a man who supposedly walked into the dense forest of Brazil and died end up in a shop in a coastal city of Peru, thousands of miles away across the Andes Mountains? The standard explanation is that it was traded hand to hand across the continent. This is the diffusion theory, but the speed and direction are wrong. Trade routes in the Amazon generally follow the rivers. To move a small gold ring from the deep Mato Grosso upstream over the impassable barrier of the Andes and into a frantic urban center like Lima is a logistical absurdity. It is a vector that opposes the flow of gravity. The existence of the ring in Peru suggests a terrifying alternative: that the expedition, or at least one member, did not die in the jungle, or that the expedition never went where they said they were going. If Fawcett's ring made it to Peru, did Fawcett? Was the entire expedition a misdirection? We look at the theodolite readings. We look at the impossible pace of a crippled man. We look at the total absence of equipment in the tribal zones. We look at the ring in the pawn shop. The data does not form a picture of a tragic accident. It forms a picture of a deliberate disconnect. The technical failures are too precise. The silence is too clean. We are not looking at a disappearance. We are looking at a scuttling, a captain sinking his own ship to hide the cargo. But what was the cargo? And why was it necessary to break the connection with the known world so completely? To answer that, we must stop looking at the map and start looking at the destination. We must examine the target coordinates. We must look at what Fawcett believed he was walking toward. Because the final anomaly is not what happened to the men. The final anomaly is the thing they were hunting. The signal did not degrade. It simply ceased. In the study of lost data, a gradual fade usually implies a struggle, a battery dying, a transmitter failing, a voice growing hoarse. But the disappearance of Percy Fawcett, his son Jack, and his friend Raleigh Rymel represents a hard cut, a sudden drop to zero. When we analyze the timeline of the 1925 expedition, we are not looking at a mystery that sprawls outward into infinite possibilities. We are looking at a narrative that runs straight into a concrete wall. The silence that followed May 29th, 1925, is not empty space. It is a solid object. It is the primary piece of evidence. To understand the dead end, we have to look at the transmission architecture Fawcett established. He was a man of the 19th century, attempting to disappear into a prehistoric void. Yet, he understood the tether of information. He used native runners to carry dispatches back to the telegraph station at Cuyaba. These were his data packets. For weeks, the latency was high, but the connection was stable. We have letters. We have coordinates. We have complaints about the insects and the heat. And then Dead Horse Camp. This location, 11 degrees 43 minutes south, 54 degrees 35 minutes west, serves as the event horizon. It is the last verified point of contact. The final dispatch sent from this location is clinical, optimistic, and utterly misleading. Fawcett tells his wife, Nina, that she need have no fear of failure. He mentions the party is suffering from insects, but remains in good health. Then he severs the connection. He sends the runners back. He explicitly states that he intends to go dark. He writes that he does not want a rescue party sent after him, fearing the rescue attempts would result in unnecessary deaths. From a digital archaeology perspective, this is a deliberate wiping of the server logs. Fawcett did not just get lost, he encrypted his path. He removed the metadata that would allow anyone to trace the error. This decision created a vacuum that the world has been trying to fill for a century. But every attempt to reestablish the connection has resulted in corrupted data. The first major attempt to retrieve the file came in 1928 with Commander George Dyott. This is where the investigation moves from the silence of the jungle to the noise of conflicting testimony. Dyott entered the Mato Grosso not just to find a man, but to audit the silence. What he found was not a trail, but a series of glitches. Dyott encountered the Kalapalo people. In the history of this case, the Kalapalo testimony is the most degraded file in the archive. It has been overwritten, compressed, and resaved so many times that the original data is irretrievable. Dyott reported that the tribe had seen Fawcett. They described the three men. They described the smoke of their campfire, lingering for 5 days. And then they described the silence. According to Dyott's initial interpretation, the tribe implied the men were killed by a neighboring, hostile group, the Suyas. It felt like a solution. It felt like the closing bracket of a line of code. Dyott found a trunk. He found an airtight metal case. He found badges. The physical artifacts were there. The metadata seemed to match. But then the corruption set in. The artifacts were too clean. The stories didn't align with the geography. Later analysis of Dyott's interactions suggests a massive translation error, a firewall of language and cultural context that he could not bypass. The Kalapalo were perhaps telling him what he wanted to hear to make him leave, or perhaps describing a different group of travelers entirely. The signal-to-noise ratio was impossible to calculate. Dyot retreated, claiming he had solved the mystery. But the data didn't hold. The resolution was too low. The file was corrupted. This pattern repeats for decades. The silence of Dead Horse Camp acts as a gravity well, pulling in investigators and stripping them of their logic. We see the emergence of what we might call phantom data. In the 1930s, a Swiss trapper named Stefan Rattin emerged from the jungle with a story that electrified the press. He claimed to have met an old white man held captive by a tribe, a man who showed him a signet ring and whispered a message for the British consul. The world wanted this to be true. It was the Fawcett is alive update everyone was waiting for. But when we apply forensic scrutiny to Rattin's report, the pixels dissolve. The description of the man did not match Fawcett's height or eye color. The location was hundreds of miles off the projected vector. Rattin went back into the jungle to find this ghost, and predictably was deleted from the record himself. He never returned. The system swallowed him whole. The investigation hit its hardest, most physical wall in 1951. This is the moment the data became malicious. Orlando Villas-Boas, a renowned activist for indigenous rights, announced he had the bones. He had negotiated with the Kalapalo, who had allegedly confessed to killing Fawcett for a breach of protocol. Fawcett had reportedly slapped a child or failed to share a gift. They led Villas-Boas to a shallow grave between two lakes. The media cycle was deafening. The file was labeled "Case Closed." The bones were flown to London. They were treated as holy relics of the Royal Geographical Society. But biology is a strict code. It does not care about narrative closure. When the anthropologists at the Royal Anthropological Institute ran the diagnostics, the error messages began to scroll. The bones belonged to a man much shorter than Fawcett. The dental records were a mismatch. The density of the bone suggested an indigenous diet, not a European one. It was a false positive, a fabricated artifact planted in the dataset to stop the inquiries. The Kalapalo, exhausted by decades of white men demanding answers, had essentially created a decoy file. They gave the investigators a body to satisfy the algorithm, hoping the search engine would finally stop crawling their land. The bones were not Fawcett. The wall remained unbroken. As we move deeper into the archive, stripping away the sensationalism and the hoaxes, we are left with the silence of the equipment itself. One of the most haunting dead ends is not in the jungle, but in a pawn shop. The Fawcett family signet ring, gold, heavy, inscribed with the family motto, "Nec aspera terrent," difficulties be damned. This object was found in a trading post in Brazil years after the disappearance. Its recovery is often cited as proof of life or proof of death, but in reality, it is proof of nothing but entropy. An object can move without its owner. A ring can be traded, stolen, dropped, found, and traded again. The ring traveled out of the void, back into civilization, while the man who wore it remained compressed in the dark. The return of the ring is a taunt. It is a packet of data that arrived without a header or a source IP. It tells us the channel was open, but it carries no message. We must also look at the secret papers. Before he left, Fawcett deposited a document with the Royal Geographical Society. It contained the specific coordinates of his destination, the city of Z. He gave strict instructions that this document was not to be opened unless he failed to return, and even then, only by a rescue party deemed worthy. When the timeline expired and the seal was broken, the coordinates were extracted. They pointed to a location that made no sense. Geographically, the target area was a basin of dense forest with no geological indications of a lost civilization. No stone structures, no plateaus. We are forced to consider two possibilities, both of which lead to a dead end. Possibility 1, Fawcett was delusional. The Z he was chasing was a glitch in his own mind, a hallucination born of theosophy and desperate ambition. In this scenario, we are analyzing the search history of a madman. Possibility 2, Fawcett lied. He encrypted the coordinates, even in his failsafe document. He did not want to be followed. He did not want C to be found. He provided a corrupted key intentionally. This is the sensation of digital archaeology in the Fawcett case. You spend hours cleaning the audio, removing the hiss, boosting the levels, only to realize the tape is blank. The search for Percy Fawcett is a history of people walking into a room and finding it empty. Peter Fleming tried in 1932. He found nothing but the hostility of the environment. The Dyot expedition found a trunk that might have been planted. The Brazilian government launched official inquiries that dissolved into bureaucracy and hearsay. There are no missing tapes in the traditional sense. The entire event is a missing tape. The narrowing of the funnel brings us to a singular, uncomfortable realization. The investigation didn't fail because the jungle is too big. It failed because the data we are looking for likely does not exist in a format we can recognize. We look for graves. We look for stone cities. We look for metal buckles. But the Amazon is an acid bath for data. Paper rots in days. Cloth disintegrates. Iron rusts. Bone is scattered by scavengers. The physical hard drive is wiped clean every rainy season. The silence is not a passive lack of sound. It is an active overwriting process. by the time we reach the modern era, using satellite imagery and LiDAR to scan the canopy, we are no longer looking for Fawcett. We are looking for the civilization he claimed to see. And while we have found evidence of earthworks and ancient settlements in the region, the Kuhakugu site, for example, they do not match Fawcett's description of stone idols and cold light. The grid aligns, but the texture is wrong. We are left staring at the last reliable data point, Dead Horse Camp. Everything after that is static. The dead end is absolute. There is no hidden file to unlock. There is no secret archive in a basement in London that holds the answer. The tragedy of the Fawcett expedition is that it achieved exactly what Fawcett threatened in his final letter. He successfully disconnected. The investigation hits the wall, not with a bang, but with the realization that we are parsing the white noise between radio stations, looking for a pattern that was never broadcast. We are tracing a wire that was cut in 1925. And at the end of that wire, there is a specific, localized void. In the final analysis of the dead ends, we have to talk about the physical degradation of the memory. In the archives of the Royal Geographical Society, the letters are yellowing. The ink is fading into the paper fibers. The handwriting, once bold and confident, is becoming part of the background texture. The digital archaeologist looks at these documents and sees the bit rot of history. The dead end is not just that we don't know where he is. It is that the evidence that he was ever there is evaporating. The files are corrupt. The sector is bad. And as we zoom in on that final coordinate, the silence becomes deafening. There is one final detail, one specific glitch in the narrative that haunts the empty space more than any bone or ring. It is a report from a missionary, years later, who claimed to see a white child among the tribes, a child with blue eyes. The rumors of a white god or a lost king persisted in the region for decades. This is the ultimate corruption of the data. The idea that Fawcett didn't just die, but that he was assimilated, that his code was integrated into the source code of the jungle. It suggests that the silence wasn't total, that there was a signal, but it had changed frequency. But like every other lead, it leads nowhere. The child is never found. The missionary disappears or recants. The story becomes folklore. We are left with the sensation of pressing our ear against a cold transmitter, waiting for a tube to warm up, waiting for a hum that never comes. The investigation ends here, not with a body, but with a total loss of telemetry. The screen is dark, the cursor is blinking, and the jungle is quiet. The noise began almost immediately after the silence set in. While the physical transmission from Percy Fawcett ceased in May of 1925, a secondary, phantom signal began to broadcast across the chaotic frequency of the global press. This was not data. It was distortion. In the years following the disappearance, the narrative shifted from a rescue mission to a myth-making exercise. The funnel of our investigation usually narrows toward hard evidence. But here, in the 1930s, it briefly widens into hysteria. We must filter out this static to find the tangible anomalies hidden underneath. The primary source of this distortion arrived in 1932. A Swiss trapper named Stefan Ratton emerged from the Mato Grosso with a report that he had spoken to a white man held captive by an indigenous tribe near the Rio Bonito. Ratton claimed the man was old, bearded, and had revealed himself to be a colonel. The captive allegedly showed Ratton a signet ring and pleaded with him to contact the English friend of the major. This report is significant not because of its veracity, but because of its specific mechanical failure. Ratton described a man broken by captivity. However, the psychological profile of Fawcett, established over decades of rigid military discipline and theosophical fatalism, suggests a man who would have died before accepting the status of a hostage. Furthermore, when accurate dates were applied to Ratton's travel logs, the geography became impossible. He could not have covered the distance between the sighting and the outpost in the time recorded. The signal was false. Ratton disappeared into the jungle shortly after, attempting to return to the location. He was never seen again. The jungle had simply swallowed the witness, just as it had swallowed the subject. We move forward to 1951. The signal spikes again, this time with biological data. Orlando Villas-Boas, a renowned Brazilian activist and explorer, managed to negotiate with the Kalapalo people. Through a series of exchanges, the elders admitted to killing the three men Fawcett, his son Jack, and Raleigh Rymel, claiming the explorers had violated tribal etiquette and refused to share gifts. This is the moment the narrative usually ends for the history books. A confession, a location, a resolution. Villas-Boas was led to a grave site near the Killuene River. He excavated a set of human remains. These bones were presented to the world as the mortal remains of Percy Fawcett. The white god of the Xingu had been reduced to a box of calcium and dust. The media cycle declared the case closed, but the forensic data did not align. When the bones arrived at the Royal Anthropological Institute in London for analysis, the physical reality of the skeleton refused to cooperate with the story. The biometrics were incorrect. The height of the skeleton was too short. The dentition, the arrangement and condition of the teeth did not match the dental records of the colonel. Percy Fawcett was over 6 feet tall. The bones belonged to a man significantly shorter Institute returned a verdict of negative identification. The bones were likely those of an indigenous man, possibly offered by the tribe to appease the relentless pressure of the white search parties. The Kalapalo, exhausted by decades of interrogations, had manufactured a conclusion to make the visitors leave. The signal had been faked. The noise floor dropped back to zero. This brings us to 1979, 54 years after the disappearance. The investigation had gone cold. The jungle had been burned, paved, and regrown in patches. But the central mystery remained a void. Then a single, high-fidelity artifact appeared on the scanner. It was not a bone. It was gold. Brian Fawcett, the remaining son, had spent his life filtering the false reports. But in 1979, a signet ring surfaced. It was Percy Fawcett's ring. There was no ambiguity. The molding, the wear patterns, and the inscription were verified. The motto on the ring read, "Nec aspera terrent," difficulties be damned. The existence of the ring is the most disruptive piece of evidence in the entire timeline. It is the only object that traveled from the event horizon of the 1925 expedition back to the civilized world. However, the provenance of the ring creates a logical paradox. It was not found at Dead Horse Camp. It was not found in the grave site by the Quilluene River. It was discovered in a pawn shop in Lima, Peru. Trace the route. Lima is thousands of miles from the Xingu Basin, across the impenetrable wall of the Andes Mountains. There are two theories regarding this data point. The first is that the ring was traded, hand to hand, tribe to tribe, river trader to smuggler, moving slowly west over 5 decades until it reached a shop window in Peru. This suggests the colonel died in the jungle, and his possessions were stripped and scattered into the localized economy of the Amazon. The second theory is far more clinical. In the final days of the expedition, Fawcett's correspondence indicated a severe decline in the health of Raleigh Rimal. One leg was swollen and infected. He could barely walk. Jack Fawcett was suffering from despondency. The colonel, driven by the obsessive coordinates of City Z, may have made a calculated decision to sever ties with his support network. If the ring was found in a shop, it means it was sold. If it was sold, it was a transaction. But the ring was found in 1979. The timeline of its arrival in the shop is obscure. We are left with a physical object that teleported from a point of absolute loss to a point of commerce. It is a solid anchor point that refuses to tell us which direction the ship was sailing. We must now narrow the focus. We discard the rumors of the 1930s. We discard the false bones of 1951. We are left with the geography. The funnel narrows to the final known coordinates. latitude 11 degrees, 43 minutes south, longitude 54 degrees, 35 minutes west. This is the location of Dead Horse Camp. It is the last place Percy Fawcett existed as a verified entity. It is the location where he typed his final letter to his wife, Nina, telling her, "You have no fear of any failure." Modern satellite imagery of this coordinate shows a dense, unbroken canopy. The deforestation that has ravaged much of the Amazon has not yet fully claimed this specific grid square. It remains a dark green void on the thermal imaging sensors. The narrative of Percy Fawcett is often romanticized as a spiritual journey, but digital archaeology requires us to look at the ground truth. The ground truth is a specific patch of laterite soil, acidic and red, under a triple canopy rainforest that blocks 90% of sunlight. We have stripped away the sensationalism. We have debunked the white god myths. We have analyzed the bones and found them wanting. We have tracked the ring to a dead end in Peru. We are left with the silence. But there is one final detail that lingers. It is not in the jungle. It is in the archives of the Royal Geographical Society in London. Among the digitized files of the Fawcett collection, there is the final logbook. It is the book he left behind before the final push, the one sent back with the native guides to ensure his data survived, even if he did not. In the margins of the log, written in a pencil graphite that has not faded in a century, are his triangulation calculations. He was obsessive about his location. He believed that C was a physical place, a stone city that could be mapped. The handwriting is steady. The numbers are precise. However, looking closely at the final entry, the pressure of the pencil marks is heavier. The graphite is darker, indented into the paper fiber. This indicates stress. It indicates a man pressing down hard to ensure the mark is permanent. The logbook ends, but the physical paper remains. If you visit the archives today and you request access to the artifact and you open the box, you are not met with a ghost story. You are met with a smell. Conservators note that despite 100 years of climate-controlled storage in London, despite the sterilization processes and the archival housing, the pages of Percy Fawcett's final logbook still carry a distinct chemical scent. It is not the smell of old paper or binding glue. When the box is opened, there is a faint, acrid release of wood smoke and damp rot. It is the smell of the Xingu rain. The molecules of the jungle in 1925 were trapped between the pages when he closed the book for the last time. They are still there. The frequency is closed. The transmission is ended. But the air from that final camp is still in the room.